Welcome to another edition of Thunderdome. This is 11.1, Chapter 11, the second chapter in Unit 7. Let's get started. Okay, personality. Probably one of the more fun chapters that we have. So, an individual's unique and relatively consistent pattern of thinking, feeling, and behaving. It's one of the hardest things to define, really. When you think about it, you know, personality is just a hard definition to nail down. But that's what we're going to work with in this class. Personality theory. So we have a lot of different perspectives to look at personality through, and we'll go through all of those. But all of them attempt to describe and explain similarities and differences in people's patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Some of them we don't really take anymore. They're just like super influential. You'll see that with Freud here in a second. So psychoanalytic perspective emphasizes the importance of the unconscious. We know that. The unconscious processes and the influences of early childhood experience, basically your relationship with your parents and how they treated you. The humanistic perspective, again, one of my favorite, optimistic look at human nature. Emphasizing the self and self-actualization and your true potential. So again, I like that one. The social cognitive perspective, so learning and conscious cognitive processes, including the importance of the beliefs about the self, goal setting, and self-regulation. And then finally, kind of getting to where you took that personality test already, hopefully, the trait perspective. And that emphasizes the description and measurement of specific personality differences among individuals. So, let's start with the weird one. So, psychoanalytic perspective, we know this is Freud's baby. Okay, we know Freud as being, again, super influential, but not necessarily something that we can talk about with scientific backing or anything like that. But he, honestly, if you went to the streets right now, and we were doing Man on the Street, I had a microphone, and I said, name a psychologist. To anybody on the street, this is the person who they would name. It's the only one they know. It's the only one anyone knows. He brought psychology to the forefront of, hey, guess what we're doing over here? Look, psychologists exist. Look, we're trying to help people deal with their emotions and desires and unconscious whatever, you know, that he brought this to the public's eye. So whenever I'm telling you, if you ask anybody, name a psychologist, they'll probably name Freud, and if they don't name Freud, they're not naming anybody. He emphasized the role of the unconscious determinants in behavior and early childhood experiences in the development of personality and psychological problems. His key ideas that we're going to go over here with personality is the id, ego, and superego, and then psychosocial stages of development, which you'll see Erik Erikson's, you'll see how he was influenced there, and then the ego defense mechanism, so how we handle anxiety. What do we do as our particular, way of dealing with an anxiety-provoking situation, or just dealing with it in general. So, his books of hysteria, the interpretation of dreams, psychology of everyday life, civilization and its discontent. All of those are really cool to read, but again, you're going to run into some weird points. We're going to go over some of those points in those books today. Psychoanalyst, that's his baby, that's his perspective. Again, we're looking through the lens of unconscious desires and behavior. And our relationship with our mothers and our fathers and all that kind of stuff, and eventually, dreams and stuff like that. That's what he really gets into all of that. He tries to pull out unconscious motives from people in every way that he possibly can. One of those things he uses is free association. So it's like a psychoanalytic technique that a patient spontaneously reports all thoughts, feelings, and mental images as they come to mind. That's actually number 1 in the quiz. But I put introspection as the right answer. I'm going to have to change number 1 on the quiz, everybody. I just had a moment of clarity. So Again, free association is just kind of like you're sitting there and you're spitting out whatever comes to your mind to the person who's not sitting on the couch, right? The person who's guiding you through this therapy session. That's what free association really truly is. Freud's legacy continues to influence psychology, philosophy, literature, art, psychotherapy. The key word there is influence. Freud saw personality and behavior as a result of the constant interplay among conflicting psychological forces. We're going to go over those things here in a second. These psychological forces operate at 3 different levels of awareness. I've already talked to you about this. It's the iceberg analogy, the iceberg theory of the mind. And so we have the conscious level, which is above the water. It's everything that you're aware of at this exact moment. So I don't know where you are, what you're doing right now, but I know what I'm aware of in this moment. I got a ring light in my face, I got a computer in front of me, I got students here, and it's gloomy outside. I hear the fan of the projector. It's a little warm in here, but not too bad. I got a mask on my face. And I want to drink tons of coffee, but I keep on almost doing it, but not doing it. You know, I used to have a tick. Whenever I taught, I'd have a Diet Coke in my hand, and I'd unscrew the cap, like I was going to drink it. And guess what I'd do? Screw the cap back on. And then do it again and again. It was like this weird little safety thing that I had. Like it was like I was doing something. It was odd. But a student called me out on it one day, and then I've never done it ever again.
That's weird.
I know. Moving on. So, conscious level, everything you're aware of now. Preconscious. It is the part of the iceberg that you can see underneath the water. It's whatever you can bring to your mind right now that you're not currently thinking about. So, let's see if I can do this. What is the name of the Mars rover that landed yesterday? Do we know?
I did not know it had a name.
Yes.
Perseverance.
Perseverance, that's right. So, again, you might have not been thinking about that, but if, again, it's right there available to you because it's recent, you can just dig it out. There it is. Okay, so that's the preconscious. Unconscious is everything you have no idea. It's everything that's ever happened to you that you're not consciously aware of. It is your desires, your aggression, and all that kind of stuff that you've repressed and bottled up. Maybe a suppressed, memory or something like that. It's everything that it's the dark, right? You don't know what it is, but it is something. It's driving you in huge ways. So the unconscious you cannot see. You have no idea. It's not present. You're unable to even access it at any moment ever, unless maybe you go to psychotherapy. Because that's the whole point of it, is to bring it up. All right. Then we get into some interesting things here. These aren't real parts of the brain. Okay? It's not next to the amygdala, it's not in the limbic system, it's nothing like that. These are pretty much ideas about how the mind works. So Freud believed that people had a certain amount of psychological energy. They form into 3 basic structures. Understand that these are not separate entities, identities, or brain structures. Rather, they are distinct psychological processes. So you can almost think of these things as mental processes. So we have the id, the ego, and the superego. So let's go through these things. The id is very simple to understand. It's your desires. It's everything you want. This is the unconscious, you know. So the completely unconscious, irrational component of personality that seeks immediate satisfaction of instinctual urges and drives. It is ruled by the pleasure principle. If it feels good, give it to me right now. That's the id. So completely immune to logic, values, morality, danger, and the demands of the external world. It does not live in reality. It lives in pleasure. Okay? The pleasure principle. The motive to obtain pleasure and avoid tension or discomfort. The most fundamental human motive and the guiding principle of the id. Then we get into some terms here that you might have heard before. But two conflicting instinctual drives, the life instinct and the death instinct. So eros is the perseverance, I just said the name of the rover. The self, preservation or life instinct. So this is things that give life. So think about it. You know, it's probably based in sex, okay? Biological urges to perpetuate the existence of individual and the species. Hunger, thirst, sexuality. Coach?
Hey.
All right. Okay, so the libido is a version of that. It is the pure sex drive that you've probably heard that word before. So the energy associated with expressions of sexuality, the sex drive. And then thanatos, the death instinct. Now, what is the death instinct? So one, we have to think about things that feel good, but things that are detrimental to our well-being. So what would those things be, you think? I'd say drugs, right? Alcohol, self-destructive actions, you know, blacking out, or just maybe something super aggressive, which would be like picking fights. Those would all be categorized as the death instinct, because it might feel good in the moment, but is it going to hurt you later on? Or it could hurt you immediately as well. So the id strives to increase pleasure, reduce tension, avoid pain, even though it operates unconsciously. Freud saw the pleasure principle as the most fundamental human motive. Infants are all id. Now, how do we get what we want? If the id is what we want, how do we get those things? We can't just go out and take it, as we'd probably be arrested. So there has to be a plan. The ego is the thing that develops the plan. So it is Latin for I, id was Latin for it. So partially conscious. All right, it is rational, and it regulates thoughts and behavior and is most in touch with the demands of the external world. So the ego represents the organized, rational, and planning dimensions of personality and the mediator between the id's instinctual demands and the restrictions of the outer world. So let's say that you're crushing hard on somebody, you want to be with them, and they have a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a significant other, but you want them. What do? Do you repress that want, that desire, and you just put it in your back pocket and say, okay, can't do that right now? Or does the ego come about? Does the ego come about and say, hey, we can get there. We can be that person's significant other. There's just got to be a plan. And so you befriend them, right? And you're friends with them for quite some time. Yay, we're friends, all right. Hey, what's going on? How's your relationship? Blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, other person says, you know, it's just not going well. And you say, oh my gosh, well, I'm going to be here for you. And then it doesn't go well, and they break up, and then you're there for them. And then guess what? They might, for some reason, use you as a rebound, and that rebound might equal a relationship. The ego thinks about this. The ego knows that path. I know that sounds odd, right? And you probably could lie to yourself and be like, I would never do that. I mean, I'm just too good of a person to do that. Okay. We're not talking about you, we're talking about a part of you. We're talking about the ego, right? So the ego is going to try to get what the id wants. It's just going to plan for it. Okay? So, rational planning dimension of personality, the mediator between the id's instinctual demands and the restrictions of the outer world. So it is based in the reality principle. It understands the external world. It can postpone gratification. So the id is immediate gratification and the ego is delayed gratification. So the ego is the pragmatic part of the personality that learns various compromises to reduce the tension of the id's instinctual urges. If the ego can't identify an acceptable compromise to satisfy an instinctual urge, such as a sexual urge, it can repress the impulse, the ego can do this, or remove it from conscious awareness completely. But does it go away? No, it becomes a part of the unconscious. Again, is there any scientific backing to any of this? No. But you can understand and probably feel that this has happened before in a certain situation for you. So toddlers develop an ego. Then we get to something else. I like those memes. Ed, and Eddie are just the id, the ego, and the superego. And it's very true. Did you guys grow up with Ed, and Eddie? No?
Yes, but I only remember the episode where Ed ate like a slide or something.
I have no idea how little that narrative now.
I can't remember which one was which, because I don't know if they're in order right there, but we'll have to look that up. All right, so now we're at the superego. So in Freud's theory, the partly conscious, self-evaluative, moralistic component of personality that is formed through the internalization of parental and societal rules. So you have the id, give me what I want, give it to me right now. You have the ego, you can't have it right now, but I will get you what you want. And then you have the superego basically saying, all right, let's do this the right way. So it's the inner voice, it's your parental voice inside your head. It is your inner dialogue, okay? Everybody has an inner dialogue, yes? I hope so. So in this, it's that moralistic component, right? It's the angels, on your shoulder. It's the one saying, go about it this way. This is the right way to do it. So the superego evaluates the acceptability of behavior and thoughts, then praises or admonishes. That is a weird thing that the superego does. That voice inside your head can be very punitive, right? It can make you feel so guilty. That's you. That's a part of you making you feel guilty about something. And it's all a mechanism to, steer clear of the bad way to do something. So it judges your own behavior as right or wrong, good or bad, acceptable or unacceptable. And should you fail to live up to these morals, the superego can be harshly punitive, imposing feelings of inferiority, guilt, shame, self-doubt, and anxiety. This is developed around 5 or 6 years old. So you understand what is right and what is wrong. There's the id, ego, and superego. Check it out later if you want to. I'm not going to read all that. Here is the Iceberg Theory all in one place. It's divided up on the levels and then the parts of the mind. Good thing to study right here. Now we have ego defense mechanisms. So how do you deal with anxiety-provoking situations? So largely unconscious distortions of thoughts and perceptions that act to reduce anxiety. So let's go through these. I don't know, on the notes I think there's actually a chart that I'll put on there. So repression. The conscious exclusion of anxiety-provoking thoughts, feelings, and memories from conscious awareness, the most fundamental ego defense mechanism, a repressed thought. To move that thought, feeling, memory into a place where it's not readily available anymore. Displacement, ego defense mechanism that involves unconsciously shifting the target of an emotional urge to a substitute target that is less threatening or dangerous. Let's say I have a bad day at work, right? I had to write 14 referrals, even though I've never written a referral in my entire teaching career. I've been teaching for 9 years. And I go home, and I just had a bad day. I couldn't take it out on anybody here at school because I might get fired. And so I go home and I yell at my dog. That is displacement. All right, sublimation, an ego defense mechanism that involves redirecting sexual urges toward productive, socially acceptable, non-sexual activities, a form of displacement. This is kind of weird to think about, but let's say that you have a sexual desire and you can't act on it, so you hop on the elliptical and just get it for a little bit. That is sublimation, okay? That's a form of it, at least, a good example of it. Rationalization, justifying one's actions and feelings with socially acceptable explanations rather than consciously acknowledging one's true motives or desires. You've heard people do this all the time. They do something, it's bad, and then they try to rationalize it with acceptable explanations. A lot of people do this. Then we have projection, the attribution of one's own acceptable urges or qualities to others. I might have messed up this question on the quiz too. Just trying to get it done, I wasn't thinking about it. So, the attribution of one's own unacceptable urges or qualities to others. Let's say that I want to lose weight, or I want to get in better shape, and I'm not acting on it myself. But I'm giving other people advice about how to do it. That would be projecting, okay? Then reaction formation, thinking or behaving in a way that is extreme opposite or unacceptable of urges and impulses. The opposite reaction that you would kind of understand, like, so maybe you've been, you tripped and you fell in front of a bunch of people, and instead of being like embarrassed and kind of shy about it or something like that, you maybe laugh about it or cry about it. So the opposite of unacceptable urges or impulses, I don't know, that's a hard one to describe using an example.